into that category. You'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program? Well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to Let's Talk program in K Vaughan Radio, PO Box 195, Charlestown in Navy. So give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You have a question or a comment? Perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down. So when you get into the show, you're well organized and you take as little time as possible so that we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we'll not accept anything we deem that's not within our broadcast standards. But we encourage you to always be forceful with your point. Thank you again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, talk that get results. Also, you can follow the live stream on our Facebook channel, our Facebook page at Vaughan Radio, and our YouTube channel at Vaughan Radio. Thank you all again for joining us tonight. Conrad Nile Library, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to Mr. Stanley, my colleague here this evening. Webbo, to your hard-working staff at Vaughan Radio, pleasant good evening, and to everyone in tune to this program. Webbo, once again, we gathered to discuss the issues affecting the people, something I always like to do. Nevertheless, Webbo, I'm sure the people of Nevis has been affected by the recent war in Ukraine. Of course, it seems to be what's been bombarding the people's ears and minds, and everything else is quite deep, Webbo. But once again, maybe we can talk a little about that this evening. But once again, Webbo, thank you so much for having me here on this program again.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webbo, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, and more particularly the people of Nevis, those who listen to us on the World Wide Web, and throughout the Caribbean Basin, including Facebook and YouTube. This evening, of course, is not such a good evening for us regarding the unfortunate mishap at the Bastia Pier with that person who drowned. Webbo, I think it is every parent's responsibility to teach their children to swim. I took up that responsibility and ensured that my two boys were given the opportunity. I took them to the beach, and fortunately both of them learned to swim. You don't have a chance once you hit that water unless somebody's going to assist you, unless you're lucky. From the time you hit that water, fright, despair, the whole 9 yards steps in. Fortunately, there is a swimming program that I heard from the broadcast of Vaughan Radio that has been initiated by somebody among us, and it would probably be in the primary schools or a few of the primary schools, as the case might be. But it is a great initiative regarding the ability of that person to teach our people to swim. That, of course, like I said, it gives you a fighting chance once you are capable of swimming and you hit the water, a fighting chance of survival. And in that regard, I do not know what happened, how it happened, but I believe this is the second person who would have drowned as a result of attempting to get onto the ferry, or as the case might be, get off of the ferry. I'm not 100% certain in terms of the dynamics regarding those two persons. But, of course, like I said, it is a program that should have been initiated a long time ago. But, you know, sometimes we don't have the time even to take care of the priorities. In this regard, unfortunately, that person perished. Well, we are at a crossroad. And of course, I understood that CARICOM has been in the news again, and in that regard, we are hoping that bigger things can come out of the collaboration with CARICOM. Not only the Eastern Caribbean countries, but also the wider Caribbean that brought about CARICOM. Well, I'm hoping that we can get some regional people coming in to St. Kitts and Nevis and to, in fact, bring their dollars from the region, throughout our region, sub-region, and invest in our little island of Nevis and St. Kitts, and as a result, we would be on the conveyor belt of going upward and onward regarding financial sufficiency. So, in that regard, I am hoping that CARICOM would begin to step up its game to play a better or more important role regarding the interregional investments, as the case might be. Liat has been in the news again, Liat. And fortunately, we are having some of our pilots being spread throughout the globe. And that, of course, took some strain off of the company. Liat, our regional airline, has served us well over the past 60 years. And or longer than 60 years. And it's has not been doing very well financially simply because of the airline industry. The airline industry never made money. Never made money. They make money when the aircrafts are new. Once they begin to get in their later years, they're going to call for repairs, and it costs a pretty penny to keep them flying in the air, flying. As a result, they never made money. And we could go back to BOAC, Braniff, Transworld, Carib Air, Premier. They all have gone onto the trash heap of history. And this, of course, supports my point. Airlines don't make money. Let me rephrase it. The airline industry is not a profitable business. It's not a sustainable business. And as a result, I would recommend people to stay away from investing in airlines. I could remember at one point I walked into a brokerage firm and they told me they're going to recommend some of Eastern Airlines shares. I said, Eastern Airlines? I said, no. I never took it. Eastern Airlines has gone to the great beyond years ago. So, to emphasize my point, the airline industry has never been a profitable industry, and therefore I recommend people to stay away from the airline. Our governments have kept Liat as a regional airline afloat over the 60 plus years or 70 plus years that it has been flying in our region, and it has done a very good service. I can't think if we have had any accidents with Liat. I don't think we have ever had any accident with Liat, which tells me we supported it financially, and as a result, the pilots were well trained, and as a result, they have done a masterful job with reference to an accident-free airline. Now, I understood because of the financial woes of Liat, some of the pilots have been scattered worldwide. That is a good thing. You can't carry all the load financially in terms of employees. Shed some by giving other places or sending your pilots or some of the pilots to other places. Now,
Mr. Stanley, you spoke about CARICOM, and it just reminds me of such a beautiful group of islands here in the Caribbean, and but to me, that does nothing to sustain the relevance of the unity. Without trade amongst the countries, what is really CARICOM? Without trade. I know the European Union was formed based on trade. It came out of the German steel industry, and then other important issues strengthened the union. But what we don't have amongst ourselves here in CARICOM is trade, the exchange of goods and services at a volume that makes CARICOM a serious economic bloc, or some kind of economic bloc. What do we produce? What do we trade amongst ourselves? I sometimes wonder that if CARICOM, whereas it's important to have such unity, but what are we to expect? I don't see much development coming out of CARICOM in terms of inter-regional trade, and not even inter-regional awareness to any great extent, or inter-regional consciousness. What I see is the fact that people can move freely. People are moving from the bigger countries, where the money value is not very strong, and move to the smaller countries, where they are able to be employed. And to me, some serious situation can develop in these smaller islands. These smaller islands the economy is not very strong, but they find themselves overburdened with a lot of people moving from the bigger islands to the smaller islands. I think somewhere along the line, the cat is being put before the horse or something when it comes to CARICOM, because the whole idea of the passport, which of course is the basis of free movement, we probably have arrived there too fast, too quick, too soon, before we have something that really glue these countries together, other than the fact that we probably were all colonies of a European country. I hope to see more relevance within the region and feel it now that we got war outside. I mean, what are we doing for ourselves? It's quite a good indicator that we got to move from being dormant to being active as it relates to self-sufficiency, as it relates to the welfare of our people and sustenance of our people. But in reality, we are not really thinking that way. We are totally consumed by the importation of commodities. We seems to lack that initiative to provide solutions in this modern time, or develop strategies in terms of ways and means. We basically doesn't produce much that we share amongst ourselves, and we doesn't even produce much for the outer world. So yes, in these times, I think CARICOM got to reevaluate themselves and realize that the world today can be shut off from us for various reasons. I mean, we are just coming out of a pandemic. Now there seems to be a world war. But I think to hear you say that CARICOM is in the news, I hope they're in the news for the right thing, and not just to prove that there is, or just to say that there is some semblance of unity amongst the islands. We must see some trade, some interregional activity, financial, goods and services amongst ourselves, so our people can be protected when the world becomes the way it is today. Mr. Stanley?
Well, we do have a certain amount of regional trade, although it might be at the bottom of the parameter. At the same time, there are quite a number of people who are here based on employment. The regional bank that just came in brought in an entourage or the higher echelon of management, and as a result we understand that facet of our unity as it relates to CARICOM. People who are academically prepared to take on the top jobs within even the financial industry, they're here. And in other areas too, they're here. But we are emerging. It is not a snail's pace, but maybe a little faster than a snail's pace. But at the same time, nothing happens big, or nothing happens, period, until it's time. And in that regard, we are hoping that better regional trade at a higher proportional level can come out of the interrelationships with our CARICOM association, CARICOM union, as the case might be. Webbo.
You know, Stanley, there's
This is Thought That Get Results. Edric W. Stanley, Conrad Nye Library. Your phone calls a little later on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Let me just give a little shout out to Ted Hobson. I got you. Dr. Bartlett and the Honorable Spencer Brand. We wish you a great evening. We'll be back right after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. Builders Paradise has over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Wow! Oh, and remember, we're open all day Saturday to serve you better. This is something that you can't refuse. Visit Builders Paradise today at the C.A. Paul Southwell Industrial Site in St. Kitts, or call them at 466-4938.
When VON vibrates, the whole Caribbean must shake.
860 AM, the Powerhouse.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley and Conrad Nye Library. Your phone calls a little later on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Now, I got prepared for me some information on the war that I think Naya referred to, some of the latest information, and certainly in my mind also it has been occupying the minds of almost everybody, and well, maybe if it hasn't, it should, because that's a real intriguing situation that's happening on one spectrum or the other. So let's go to that first from the BBC, and then we can discuss on the flip side of it.
The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has said his country is defending freedom and paying a high price in its fight with Russia in a speech to the European Parliament that received a standing ovation. He urged Europeans to give Ukraine their full support and allow its entry to the EU.
We are fighting for our rights, our freedoms, our life. We are fighting for survival, and this is the highest of our motivations. But we are also fighting to be equal members of Europe. I believe that today we are showing everybody that's exactly what we are.
The British Prime Minister Boris Johnson has accused Vladimir Putin of using what he called barbaric and indiscriminate tactics against innocent civilians in his war against Ukraine. Speaking after talks in Warsaw with the Polish Prime Minister, Mateusz Morawiecki, Mr. Johnson said the Russian leader will not succeed.
We will continue to support our Ukrainian friends, and we will continue to do that for as long as it takes. And one way or another, I am absolutely convinced, I'm more convinced than ever, as this hideous conflict progresses, that Putin will fail.
The Ukrainian authorities say 5 people have been killed in a Russian attack on the main television tower in the capital, Kiev. Social media footage showed smoke billowing up from the steel tower, which remains standing. The attack took some broadcasts off air. Satellite images show a huge Russian convoy closing in on the Ukrainian capital. Our chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, is there.
The movement of this huge convoy inching its way towards the Ukrainian capital. The big question is, how soon will it actually come right to the edge of the city? But this is the 6th day of Russia's invasion, and we see not just that armored convoy, but there's been the attack close to the TV tower, and then there's this very serious warning from the Russian defense minister that people should move away from 2 key security installations, both people who work in those buildings, but also people in the surrounding area. So you can sense the mounting anxiety here.
The UN is making an emergency appeal for $1.7 billion to help people fleeing the conflict in Ukraine. Imogen Folks reports from Geneva.
UN aid agencies say the situation in Ukraine is turning very ugly, very fast. They don't now expect things to calm down quickly. This appeal is designed to cover the emergency needs of up to 6 million Ukrainians inside the country for the next 3 months, and of many thousands more who are fleeing across borders. The money will go to provide shelter for those who have been driven from their homes, as well as cash grants for people who have lost their jobs, and support for basic services like health, water and electricity.
US defense officials say Russia's operation has been slowed by Ukrainian resistance and some of their troops have surrendered. In its latest assessment of President Putin's invasion, the Pentagon said Russian forces did not yet control the skies, even after 6 days, and had not yet taken key targets such as Ukraine's second city Kharkiv or the southern port of Mariupol.
So I wanted to put that as a backdrop as maybe we start the discussion. And as I listened myself, I noted a couple of points that were made. They're defending their country and paying a high price, fighting for life, freedom, and rights. And one reporter in making his report said, freedom, well, I made a note, I made a note after hearing the report. Freedom means more than buildings, assets, and material possessions. Edric.
Boris Johnson, I hope, would take up a position as Sir Winston Churchill, the lion-hearted Prime Minister, when Germany decided to take on the rest of Europe. And as Churchill stated, at the time when Germany decided to unleash an enormous amount of firepower. We will fight them in the air, we'll fight them on the land, and we'll fight them in the sea. German U-boats were operating widely in the Atlantic as they sank many of the ships going back and forth between Britain and Europe. Boris Johnson has to, in fact, step into the shoes of the lion-hearted Prime Minister, Sir Winston Churchill, the late Winston Churchill, and do what he has to do to help Ukraine. Now let's move to the more meat on the bone, as the case might be. Ukraine has applied for membership in NATO. And I'm wondering if in their charter they cannot accept the membership of Ukraine, more or less go back, depending on the date of application, to go back and admit Ukraine into NATO using a retroactive system to in fact admit Ukraine into NATO if there is such an application, if there is such a situation where it could be applicable to not the present application, but if Ukraine had applied, let's say, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, to NATO, do it retroactively, and then unleash the firepower of NATO on Russia. I am almost certain that it could be done. At the same time, I do not know what the charter says. At the same time, I do not know how applicable it is, or it would be. But this is a mechanism with reference to real time, that you give the Ukrainian or Ukraine the possibility of becoming a member of NATO. Also, I would believe that they would have applied for membership in the European Union. Do it retroactively. Russia is going to squawk and bark at anything with reference to the emergence or the acceptance of Ukraine in NATO or the European Union. But it can't hold all the cards. Russia doesn't hold all the cards. Russia holds one card, and they have decided to use, simply because they've got the autocratic authority to do what they want, how they want, when they want, and where they want, and they have invaded a sovereign country. The one card that they had, or they have taken that card and they have misplayed it, and like I've said, it wouldn't stand. It cannot stand. And if NATO were to retroactively bring Ukraine into full NATO membership, then we can use the aircrafts of NATO, the firepower of NATO, and bring Putin and his regime to their knees. I leave it there. I've got much more to say. Naya.
You would like Boris Johnson to do like the great Winston Churchill?
Quite so.
What's your middle name by chance?
Winston.
Okay. Naya.
Well, the war in Ukraine is a major thing. It's first, I think, the human waste, humanity, human life, human suffering is very hard to really witness, and it's a tough situation happening there right now. Well, you know, it's interesting because if we rewind a little bit, I once made a statement here that when you see superpowers getting along, it's a good thing for the world. It's a good thing for the world. I don't know why when superpowers getting along, there are some people start saying, oh, Russia and America shouldn't get along. The reason why I'm saying this is because of the people who suffer, you see, the people in the front line. The 21-year-old, 25 years old young man go out, they waste their life. Now look at Ukraine today. Ukraine is being totally demolished. And that's what's going to happen, I think. Well, I think we're very close to a world war because Mr. Stanley is talking about Ukraine in NATO. I think it was easier for Ukraine to join NATO before the war started. Because if they accept Ukraine into NATO now, this is a world war. And I don't think the players want to see a world war, to be quite honest with you. I don't think Biden, I don't think Johnson wants to see. No one wants to see. And they don't want to further escalate this thing, you know. Ukraine accession. In fact, last week, Ukraine made a plea for NATO acceptance, and the leader said no one seems to be hearing him. They seems to be hearing him a little more about the European Union accession, and that would be a good thing. The question is, how much would they be willing to really give their soldiers to operate within the Ukraine? I listened to Maurice Johnson today. He's in Poland, and he have made it clear that they don't want to be in the skies over Ukraine fighting, you know, with Russian, you know, aircraft and all that. That is a no-no, he said. To me, Webbo, Ukraine has been left alone, and I don't know how long it can really hold out being left alone. They are doing good, but Ukraine can't survive the full onslaught of the Russian army. That is an obvious truth. And I don't know how long the European Union or NATO is going to stop before they actually get actively involved in this. I know the sanctions, and trust me, from what I've made to understand, that, I mean, the sanctions are very damaging to Russia, but it's going to take time. And we can't wait for Ukraine to be totally demolished to get involved. As far as I check, the Ukrainian leader is very dissatisfied, and at the same time he's using words of encouragement for Europe, but he have also expressed dissatisfaction about their level of participation. Look how long it takes Germany to get on board, but they seems to be on board now, and a lot of people are sending weapons. They got to be mindful these weapons, they end up in the hands of the Russians, because weapon, who's going to operate all these weaponry if you're not going to send personnel? It's an interesting episode, Webbo, because the way I look at it, if I go down the road and I see two men about to fight, and somehow I got preference, I'm better friends with one of them, I can say something to make the fight happen, and I can say something to make it probably not happen. I find before the war, the American input was quite escalating, or to me had that tendency to escalate things. I know it is happening. Yes, they are sending money, they are sending all this, but what we want to see is action. I know it's not easy. It's not easy for Americans to get involved. They've been fighting for 30 years recently. And I don't think Biden can make the case to the American people, you know, to get Americans involved in a physical sense. But for all of them to abstain, even those that are very close to the front line, Poland, you know, it's kind of left poor Ukraine pretty lonely, pretty much lonely. And I hope they can move fast in really accepting them within the European Union. Poland is in the European Union, it's next door. And on doing so, they can really get involved and stop the slaughter in Ukraine. I mean, I don't know what else to say, but to me, that situation has global implication. And yes, it can easily turn into a world war. Maybe Ukraine accession into Europe may cause it to be further inflamed. Into NATO, certainly. This might turn into a world war. Belarus have sent troops down from the north into Ukraine. And so what NATO or the European Union is waiting for? I think somebody's afraid of Russia. Or, that's a loose statement. They may be afraid of a third world war. Of course, Russia have made some statement about nuclear, and I think they're trying to frighten the world. But it can come to that quite easy, because the way Russia is shut off from the world. I mean, Putin can decide to do something that is totally destructive. That is not something, I mean, out of the question at all. He's totally shut off in sports, in every aspect of life. Russia is being shut off. What is left for them to do? They can act in a careless way and do that. So
what do you recommend now? Because I'm trying to follow you.
Well, I'm hard to follow right now.
I figure so, because I'm really trying.
What do I recommend?
Yeah, because
I recommend that yes, I know where you're coming from. I recommend that the European Union get involved to accept Ukraine into the Union and to get involved.
And then what?
Well, because even without them getting involved, it might still get to the point, you know.
Okay, but, but
to stop the onslaught, to stop the bloodshed, the human killing, the human lives.
Right, but what I'm saying is, you're recommending, suggesting a certain course of action, and I'm asking what will be the likely outcome or outcomes if you go that way. Remember what we do in life, we make a case, right? And we get people to see it our way. So I'm trying to follow you.
Well,
so what do you think will happen if they get involved? Then what?
Well, I think that aspect of they getting involved along that line, military action, will really put the icing on the cake. They would be complete in their involvement, because with the sanctions and then their involvement, I don't think Russia can easily rise from the dust. Russia will have to accept defeat.
Okay, so they will accept defeat after what? A fight?
Yes, a war.
Okay, so in essence you're recommending that they go to war with Russia?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You see, I'm kind of slow to get around, but I got you now.
Well, nothing happens or begin nothing without first considering what the end will be. And in this regard, Russia chose to start this war. Russia was there, and because of Putin's agitation, because he's so paranoid, I can live side by side without even reaching over your boundary to pick a fruit, if I understand the laws of no trespass or trespassing, as the case might be. Russia has brought this upon itself and now has created a vacuum and is drawing the whole world into this World War III. And now is going to blame Biden for telling the truth about what intelligence they have regarding Russia's involvement, Russia's uncontrollability, Russia's desire to reconstitute the Union of Soviets, of Socialist Republics, simply because the landmass of Russia is 6.6 million square miles. And he considers the Union of Soviets, of Socialist Republics, dismantled by Ronald Reagan under Gorbachev. Gorbachev was the president of Russia at the time. Reagan told Gorbachev, dismantle this wall, which divided Germany and the Soviet bloc, which Russia was given East Germany and West Germany had been given to the West.
I got Naya's recommendation. What's yours?
My recommendation is for NATO to take on Putin and allow Putin to understand that he cannot reconstitute the Soviet Union.
Okay, that's diplomatic language. What's it in plain language?
You've got to fight fire with fire. And NATO has the firepower to bring the Soviet Union or Russia to its knees as a global entity, as a regional entity, based on what Biden and the rest of the world have put in place with regard to the sanctions, coupled with the firepower of NATO. He cannot win. He will not win. And what Putin did, nobody troubled him. All he was, because he's paranoid, thinking that the West is choosing to unite Poland, Sweden, Czechoslovakia, all those countries have brought about a certain degree of democratization, and as a result, Putin doesn't like that, he doesn't want that, and as a result, he feels being threatened. Nobody's coming to eat your lunch.
So in essence, you would fight back?
Fight back, you have to fight back.
And as a consequence, start the inevitable.
Listen.
The answer is yes?
Yes.
Okay. And Naya said the same thing, in essence, correct, Naya?
Yeah.
So the board of...
It's a NATO, I say, yes, but same thing, right?
Right, so in essence, the both of you would have the war started, full-fledged.
The war started already, Webbo.
Full-fledged World War III.
I started, but just like World War II and World War I,
can't wait too long.
They both ended, and the rest of the world had to come together to bring the tyrant to his knees.
And so you're not worried in that recommendation about the nuclear...
it could be a bluff. At the same time...
Could be a bluff.
Trump told the Kim Jong-un of North Korea, I have a bigger nuclear weapon button than you.
Yeah, but Russia got the
so if you want to press your nuclear button...
Let me take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Herbert, and to everyone.
Good evening, sir.
I just would like to say back when Trump was president, this thing started with Ukraine and Russia. Remember the allegation, the Russia allegation, Mr. Herbert, about Trump? You see how all of that has turned out? that they're now accusing the Hillary Clinton campaign of this whole thing. And now, see, now we are now in a war with this Russia-Ukraine story. And the weak president for the world after 1 year have noticed. Look at the debacle from Afghanistan. Listen to the commanders of the American army. They can't even answer questions from Congress straight. So now we ask for this thing. The Democrats ask for it. The world asks for this thing during the presidency of Donald Trump. And now, election has consequences, Mr. Herbert. Thank you very much.
I was trying to follow you, but I don't sure you did.
If Trump were
so Carter, you're saying that the cause of this thing is back with Hillary Clinton, and so that's your connection?
Yeah, the connection. Remember the phone call that Trump made to Ukraine that started the impeachment?
Mm-hmm.
So the Democrats never let it rest.
So
it was Ukraine, Trump, Russia. Trump was something for Russia and all of those kind of things.
So you think out of that conversation,
yes, Russia, the president of Russia took the chance after America brought out a strong president and put in a weak one. And then he watched what happened to the other country. In Afghanistan, how the withdrew, leaving the military weapons, Naya.
Okay.
More weapons was left in Afghanistan than now being left in Ukraine.
So walk with me. I'm not going to take long. I'm just going to take a few seconds to put together how I understand it, and you can let me know whether I got you or not, right?
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying that when Donald Trump was president, and you had the back and forth about the phone call and so on and so forth, and then they voted out Donald Trump and put in Biden. As a consequence of that, that's why we have what we have in?
No, it's not just that.
Okay.
Other things happen, Mr. Herbert.
Like
just
what?
Imagine you're accusing someone of you in an allegation with the President of America. You're accusing the Russian president all along. Don't you think he got irritated like how we are saying that he crazy?
Well, so that's what I'm saying. So as a consequence of all that,
yeah,
and then you end up voting out Trump and putting in Biden, who you say is a weak president. Work with me. Therefore, that is why you think we're having what we're having now.
What we're having now.
I got you.
Putin took the opportunity.
I got you. Okay. Yes. It's interesting. So now I got your view. I got Mr. Stanley's view, and I got the caller's view. And that is what is fascinating about it. And you know what happens? We're in this conflict because of varying views among leaders and different persons and so on and so forth. And I have discussions about this invasion, this war, one-on-one with other people as well. And we were talking about how people, the children and the men are told you have to stay back and fight, and the women leave, etc., etc. And I said, in terms of my contribution, you got to understand that Putin and those on that side don't necessarily think the way we think. When we see people die and children hurt, it evokes our emotion. But maybe not so with these folks, because they're accustomed to it all the time. So the way people think plays a very important part in this scenario.
You know, Webbo, once upon a time there was a song that wasn't that popular, but it was done by Sting. Sting is a big singer from the band Police back then. And the song was saying the Russians love their children too. That is true. I don't think Putin is inhumane, to be quite honest. But when things enter that tunnel of politics and power and might and ammunition, one human life, yes, sometimes is very insignificant.
Right.
But I do believe all of us have that humane thing within us.
But it comes down, don't it, to the price you will pay. Because for some people, right, that is a certain thing is too high a price to pay for something.
Yeah.
For others, they'll give you in a heartbeat.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that in essence is the point that I was trying to make.
I hear you.
Right? To them, what's the cost of, I mean, a couple of thousand dead bodies is okay. Maybe a couple of million people displaced and stuff like that is okay according to what we hope to achieve.
Yeah. Yes.
You see, I mean, the people in the West who, you know, are more emotional maybe when it comes to certain things, they may react differently to seeing the children starving and so on and so forth. Maybe other people might say, well, it's just the price we have to pay because we have to get this. And then other people may say, but okay, but that's too high a price though.
Well, let me say this. A lot of people don't understand global politics, but yet they give their opinion, and if you are at a higher level of understanding, you will be able to determine whether or not they're talking sense or nonsense. Now, the war in Afghanistan ended, and it wasn't as pretty as expected, simply because you're dealing again with, just like you said, people from that region think different, and as a result we think different from this region. The United States was pumping billions of dollars into Afghanistan and has done a remarkable job by bringing Afghanistan from a 7th century country to a 21st century country. The pace was very, very slow. The Taliban just didn't want things to happen that way. As a result, they continued this guerrilla war. Eventually, the United States decided we're going to pull out. Trump is the one who started the whole thing. We're going to pull out. Biden was given the hand of card to play when Trump got kicked out of office. And as a result, Biden had no choice. Well, he had a choice. He could have rescinded what Trump had started. But he decided America had no appetite for additional dead bodies coming home from Afghanistan. And as a result, he continued the process. And I kept saying that airplane that was fully loaded with people was a great target for those suicide bombers. As a result, we knew what happened. The deadline was given, and the airplane was there on the tarmac, ready to take people out. People were trying to get out. And the suicide bomber just decided he has an opportunity and took advantage of that opportunity. 13 American soldiers, including more people, died. The United States didn't have the appetite to see more dead bodies coming out of Afghanistan, and therefore they pulled out. It was a debacle. it would have happened under Trump the same way. Anyhow, a poll to determine the appetite of the United States as to whether they should go into Ukraine and help Ukraine fight, 77% of the people said, look, we have to go back. We have to go and help the Ukrainian people. 77%. What does that tell you? Even though the United States lost the appetite on a regional war in Afghanistan for dead bodies to come back home, they recognize the possibility of more dead bodies coming out of Ukraine. But yet, they have voted overwhelmingly for Ukraine to be given the help that it's asking for.
What does it say about, because now they're making, some people are evaluating Putin, whether he is mentally deranged, whether he is stable, and so on and so forth. What do you make of leaders? Good evening, thank you for holding.
Yes, good evening. I don't understand. What's the war is all about?
The war is all about space, power.
Space and power?
Space.
Oh, okay.
Space, meaning give me more territory. Give me the power to rule the world. I want to be on the world stage. We were there before. We got kicked out off of the world stage based on United States President Ronald Reagan.
Okay, so caller, yes.
Yes, Mr. Herbert.
Go
All
ahead.
we need to go and pray for these people in Ukraine. We need to pray for them. They need prayer.
They've been a lot of prayer offered.
So your suggestion is that
Yes, we pray and let's send them in, sending somebody to help them, and they need help. They need help.
so your suggestion is that we need prayer, and you need some people to go in and help them to fight.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening. It sounds almost as if the panel is thinking that this is the start of World War III. But I don't think it will come to that, and we are close to that. I don't think Russia is going to get bogged down in Ukraine either. Before that happens, what is more likely to happen is they unleash a really bloody war on the Ukrainians, because they have been holding back, you know. They have been going with tanks blazing into the cities, okay? And there are also other options, and Putin himself raised it when he said he's putting his nuclear forces on the alert. The U.S. or the West response to that was pretty lukewarm, because I guess the figure, it's not them it's intended for. It's Ukraine, right? It's not all intercontinental ballistic missiles that they have that are nuclear and would threaten the West. They also have these tactical nuclear weapons. And I don't see Russia sustaining really heavy casualties and not using all the weapons at its disposal. So what I think the tragedy might be that Ukraine becomes a wasteland, okay? Because I don't see Russia packing up and leaving unless it gets what it wants.
Okay, caller, let me see if I can follow you. So your suggestion is that it will be confined to just Russia and Ukraine?
Yes.
And the West will not get involved, as the panelists they were suggesting?
No. Right.
And so even as the Russia, as you're suggesting, turns the heat up and blows out Ukraine, then the rest of the West will do nothing. That's what you're suggesting.
That's exactly what I'm saying. You really think that the West would sacrifice all that they have for Ukraine? They would have they would have to respond if Russia attacked them. But do you think they're willing to risk everything for Ukraine? They didn't do it for Crimea. They didn't do it for whereas Russia annexed. They're not going to do it for Ukraine either.
Okay, but Carlo, that's a real interesting take on it. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Edric. That's interesting.
Dead wrong.
His view is different to yours, and you conclude he's dead wrong.
Well, what I'm saying is, we know, there's no question about it, Trump and Putin were two peas in a pod, and if Trump had been in office, you wouldn't find the United States, bringing along the world, because Trump had started putting wedge into NATO.
Yeah, but
let me get back to the main
point.
point.
We don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
We gotta leave now. But that's. I thought you were responding to the point the Carter made. So where he comes in with Trump and.
Well, I'm just saying to him, if Trump had his way, he would have weakened NATO.
Yeah, but that's.
But anyway, where we are right now, Putin wants to bring back the Soviet Union, USSR, all right? And
we don't have a lot of time, right, Mr. Stanley. So let me put some direct questions. So you think that in terms of what the point the caller is making, you think that the West will get involved with forces?
Right.
He thinks not.
Right.
Naya, what do you think?
I think they should get involved.
Will they?
I don't know, Webbo.
You don't know, because the caller seemed to be suggesting that he doesn't think they have the ability, but the caller says in his view they won't get involved because so that's interesting. Let me just take this final call. Good evening, thank you for holding. You have a minute.
Yes, I'm just calling about good to hear you.
I really got to go. If you can make a point quick, go ahead.
Yeah, the point is, sir, that the question is, why did NATO not admit Ukraine into their company, into their organization? I think that's very, very strange that they didn't do that, because
I really got to go. This is Thought That Get Results. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 o'clock for On Demand. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community. You all have a wonderful evening. We now join Leadership Matters.